It's long.
Oh, it's love.
Their groins throb.
It's sex.
They talk politics.
It's compatibility.
Neglecting friends.
Moving in.
Domestic bliss.
Ah.
Her goldfish.
Her curtains.
Her collection of cuddly pink teddy.
First tiff.
The perfect couple.
Married.
In-laws.
Her mum.
Her dad.
Her cousin Ralph.
Shopping sprees.
Our Ford Fiesta.
Our washing machine.
Our video.
Our microwave.
Our sex toys.
Fun.
Fun.
Fun. Flirting. Second tiff.
Infidelity. First row.
Sensible discussion of non-monogamy.
Second row.
Third round.
Fourth row.
Okay. Monogamy.
Brookside.
Bedroom slippers.
Spot squeezing.
Toenail picking.
Romance is dead.
Needing space.
Finding yourself.
Emotional agony.
We have to talk.
Negotiation.
Recriminations.
Compromise.
Divorce. Relationships.
How's yours?
There's a joke that I recall about a lesbian couple who go to the fair, and one of them's waiting at the bottom of the big wheel for her lover who's on the big wheel. And the wheel suddenly halts and the carriage with the woman's lover comes crashing to the ground. And the woman is rushing through the crowds trying to get to her lover, saying, "Oh my God, are you all right? Are you all right?" And she rushes up to her and says, "Darling, darling, are you hurt?" And the lover says, "Of course I'm hurt, you idiot. That wheel must have been going round at least a dozen times and you never waved at me once."
We always said to each other that love wasn't something that happened and kind of magically engulfed you. You had to a certain extent give in to it. You had to succumb to love, if that's the right phrase.
I think we're also not meant to be on our own for the rest of our lives, so it's quite natural for lesbians that would seek another lesbian to live with.
The idea of being in a stable couple relationship does not appeal to me right at the moment.
There are a number of patterns in heterosexual relationships that everybody knows about. There's a marriage, there's a honeymoon period, there's a time when the man might want bits on the side. In our relationships, there's none of this, you mustn't sleep with somebody on the first night because she won't respect you. I mean, the whole codes are different. The trouble is that there is no one to tell you what these codes are, and so you have to find them out yourself.
I think that gay people have their partnerships and their sexual relationships are particularly important to them in the sense that they're part of their identity. I think sometimes part of the process of coming out to parents, for instance, can involve getting parents to accept a partner, and that gives a kind of centrality to the relationship. But on the other hand, it means that that relationship then gets modelled on the expectations of heterosexuality.
I don't think there were any models within my family that I've based any of my relationships on. In some cases, one could almost argue that one's families are anti-models rather than being models for the relationships.
The difficulty that gay and lesbian couples have is that there's no way to give some validity to their relationship in societal terms. And often, therefore, things like coming out and being visible to in work situations and home situations become quite important signs that, in fact, the relationship is a real one.
When my best friend told me she was going to get married, I think I felt happy for her because I know that she's in love with this guy, but I also felt concerned that our friendship would change. At her actual wedding, I wasn't sure how I'd feel. I thought I might think it was a little bit stupid or that it was a very distant thing from me somehow, you know, heterosexual wedding. And at her wedding, I realized that I actually wanted to get married. I mean, sort of, especially after a couple of glasses of champagne and sitting with her family at this table and stuff, I realized that I really wanted to get married. And I was very moved by her father being there and, you know, the groom's father being there, and her father was blowing his nose and the groom's father was wiping his eyes. And I thought that I'd like my dad to be there when I made a really sort of public statement about loving someone that much. But I think that rather than thinking about buying into something that heterosexual people are doing or not buying into it, it's this is what I want. Before I came out as a lesbian or decided I was a lesbian, I decided that I wanted this. And now I want to be a lesbian and have this as well.
It might be quite fun in a kind of, sort of campy, jokey sort of way to do so, but I mean, that would all it would be. It wouldn't have any symbolism or any meaning attached to it, because I don't think that you can do that. The whole point of marriage is that it is a way for heterosexual couples to be bound together. I don't feel I need that kind of, sort of formal sanction to my relationship. The reason my relationship stays is intact is because I want it to be intact and the person I'm with wants it to be intact. If we didn't want it to remain, then it wouldn't remain. It wouldn't make any difference whether we'd been through a ritual or not. Having said that, I mean, I look forward to a day when homosexual relationships are on such an equal par that we can have rituals if we want to. I mean, if I was heterosexual, I could decide to get married if I wanted to and get all the lovely presents, or not get married, depending on what I wanted to do. If you're homosexual, you're not allowed that choice. The fact that I'm not allowed that choice doesn't bother me in the slightest. But on a political level, it'd be nice if society sanctioned our relationships by giving us a public ritual.
Most gay men or lesbian couples are often very much opposed to marriage, and they will speak out quite strongly against it and against their heterosexual friends who are married. But in fact, what the marriage means is something that they would very much like to have access to in some way or another, because otherwise it's sometimes, not clear for when the relationship really started. And then there's the issue that without that kind of visible form of commitment, other people outside of the gay communities can negate the relationship.
On our anniversary, which is the date that we moved in together, we exchanged bands and remember that date. I don't think the band is to show anybody on the outside that we are tied together. It's more for we two to know that we've given each other a gold band at that time that signified that we'd each given each other something. Slightly copying heterosexual marriages, no doubt. But of course, as we're influenced by those things, then I don't think that one can forget all those influences.
I thought you had to get married. I thought the authorities could make you get married. Obviously, I was resigned to the fact that I'd have to get married. And I thought, well, I'll get something out of it. So I met this man. He wanted citizenship of the country, and I wanted £1,500. And I got this, which is really rather expensive. It was a white wedding for my parents, really. I wore white Levi's and a little white and black piano tie. I looked quite cute. But I actually think all lesbians should get married, because how else are you going to get presents out of your parents, like a washing machine or 2 weeks on Lesbos? I mean, obviously, the more relieved they are that you're getting married, the bigger the present. So if you're very, very, very butch, you might even get a car.
I think in heterosexual marriage, there's an enormous gap at the moment between the reality of what marriage and divorce is like and the fantasy that people have about it. And I think that gay people are probably more realistic about their expectations. I also think that the way in which the high divorce rate has produced single parents, women and men living on their own, different forms of household, has made it easier in some ways for gay people to live with each other or to live on their own.
When I first became a lesbian, I saw a lot of people being non-monogamous and having strings of affairs and being very independent and very possibly living alone all their lives and being part of a close community of women, maybe living in a co-op with other women and that sort of thing, and women dropping in each other for coffee every day and maybe being lovers with Janet for those 3 years and, I don't know, becoming lovers with Susan after that or something.
I didn't need to live with somebody else, I believe, because I had my daughter. So I had someone to care for, someone that cared for me, and felt complete and didn't need a partner for any particular reason. I could get my caring and loving and laughing with more casual relationships.
There's also, I think, been a flowering of gay networks, friendship groups, that partly feed off and use the public gay facilities, and go to shows that are gay and so forth, but that also are quite varied networks of friendship and so on. And I think they offer a lot more models and possibilities for different kinds of lifestyle.
Well, I used to cruise all the time, every night, really liked it. I don't really do it anymore, for a number of reasons. One of the most important is that I've actually become allergic to leather. It's a bit unfortunate. I just go out in a sweat and get all shivery. I can't go anywhere near the cola and I completely faint away. So I have to hang around with men who wear denim or linen, which is nice. This is actually acrylic polyester mix, so that's all right. I'm not into cruising anymore anyway. I want a monogamous relationship, In fact, I want as many monogamous relationships as I can handle at any one time. Because I want to share things, like I want a joint bank account, and I want to choose lampshades together, and I want to have an argument with someone. You can't have a flaming row with someone you've only known a couple of hours, can you? Especially if he hasn't got his pants on, you can't concentrate. And I'm not into, good looks anymore and good bodies. I'm past that because usually, they're stupid, aren't they? I want someone with a bit more understanding, someone a bit more sympathetic, a bit more feeling, So I don't care what they look like. As long as they're not short. I can't stand short men.
The guy that I formed my first relationship with was a chap called Tony, was already in a non-monogamous relationship with somebody else, and therefore he brought that to the relationship that he formed with me. Certainly I, at that stage, was rather young. I was in my late teens, and didn't want to tie myself down to one specific monogamous relationship because I wanted to play around, as most people, certainly most men, want to do it at that age.
Trying to have non-monogamous relationships wasn't as easy as just forming a series of networks that were free of any notion of jealousy or possession. It was a lot more complicated. To be able to do it, it required a strong sort of a culture behind you of lots of other people trying to do the same things. A notion that you weren't just doing it on your own. And I think with the political, cultural and economic changes that have taken place in the 1980s, I think the conditions that were there that led people to try and form those types of relationships have now changed, and so it's brought into question people's willingness and ability to be able to do that. If you meet someone and you have a one-night stand and it looks like you could get on with each other, you go out together for as long as you can keep that together, as long as you are both enjoying it and having a good time. I think those specific types of relationships are quite specific to a sort of commercial gay scene, I think, that is sort of pleasure-seeking.
I was fooling around like adolescents fool around with women in clubs, sort of meeting a woman and rushing off to my friends and saying, I'm in love now, and it's her over there at the bar, that one.
I have a number of casual relationships from time to time. I don't go out looking for them, and I'm not looking to fall in love with anybody. I think if it happens, it happens.
I don't know why. I wanted a non-monogamous relationship 10 years ago, and I no longer do. I think part of the reason is just growing old. You can't go cruising every night when you're my age, and you don't want to, and you're not as successful.
The advent of AIDS has not just only put a pressure on me personally, but on all gay men to change the types of relationships they've been having. And I think that a change has come about. There has been a shift, a desexualization of the commercial scene and a shift to more people getting involved in monogamous relationships. Personally, I don't believe that that is necessary to reduce the risk of contracting HIV.
A lot of couples come to counselling after perhaps 1 to 2 years, and they're very worried about what's happening to their relationship. And basically, a lot of it is to do with the romance disappearing from the relationship. I think gay and lesbian relationships are often very romantic and very intense in the early stages. And this goes on for often quite a period of time. And then, of course, as the relationship settles and sorts itself out, then a lot of that has to change. They couldn't go on living at that level of intensity for the rest of their lives.
But as soon as I fell in love, it was just like Mills and Boone had nothing on what I felt. And it was extremely, very intensely passionate. I can't remember getting out of bed or the bath with her for the first 2 years. And after that, it's the passionate side seemed to stop. And I think that's a general pattern in quite a lot of women's relationships. But I think a lot of lesbians are actually frightened to say that the passionate side will stop because people won't place any value on that relationship. In fact, when that did happen, I was far more in love with my lover than ever before.
Heterosexual couples have those problems as well, but I think that gay men and lesbians have them perhaps in a bit more intensity because against all the odds they have managed to come together. So the romantic notion of their relationship is a strong one, and then when that starts to seem to fade and move into a sort of a normal everyday life cycle, there can be some anxieties around.
Romance or romanticism or whatever you like to call it plays an enormous part in my relationship. Partly because that's what relationships are about. It's about telling people that you love them. It's about going out for meals on your own. It's about going away on holidays. It's about pampering yourself on your own with the other person. If that wasn't part of the relationship, then there would be very little else in the relationship that mattered, that actually feeds the whole of the relationship. If you don't have that, then all the pleasure goes out of the relationship.
We became so close. We were like Siamese twins. We couldn't... one couldn't go to the post box without the other one going, and work was like a hindrance, you know, to actually get up to go to work, and we'd ring each other from work and rush home from work. And then after a while, going through this bonding period, we began to realise that there is a world outside, and it was quite dangerous to cut ourselves off.
Quite a few couples come expressing views around the issue that one of them feels the other is stifling them in some way or another, stifling their growth, their development, their identity, their independence, whatever it happens to be. And that's part of the trying to work those boundaries out between difference and sameness, and sorting out a negotiated process whereby you can still be independent and an individual within a relationship which is very much based on two people who have a lot in common, much more so than a heterosexual couple where the difference is very clear between the male and the female.
The differences that arise from relationships arise not because of our gender, because there is no difference in our gender. They arise from our personalities and from our aptitudes and from merely what we like doing. So, you know, Jonathan cooks a pretty good shepherd's pie, so he always cooks shepherd's pie, whereas I make a better lasagna, so I always make lasagna. Neither of us like to clean, so we don't, you know. So there's no kind of sort of set pattern to it. The pattern depends on what we want.
I want a sort of true love. I've really recognized that I have a desire that I think I had at the clubs as well, when I was going to the clubs a lot. It's to find a sort of true love, and I think I'm looking for a kind of Princess Charming.
it just spit up after 10 years. I don't know, you think you know someone, but I suddenly realised she'd been keeping things from me because we'd gone around the whole house. We'd had to sort out exactly what was mine and what was hers. And we were sorting through the record collection, and it was only then that she told me that Minnie Riperton had died. And, like, that's our favourite record. And I never knew. Of course, I was upset, and while I was being upset, she took the bloody Dusty Springfield records and the Joan Armour Trading and left me with the Sandy Shore. Bitch.
They asked me to do an ID shot, so here it is. It isn't exactly what I'd intended, but we'll get to that. This is the shot I intended to start my postcard off with. Now that's Auckland Harbour with Rangitoto in the background. This is the house where Stuart and I live. It's in an area called Grey Lynn. Now we call it Gay Lynn because so many gays and lesbians live there. Stuart and I made this garden between us. It's kind of a little bit like our heaven on earth. When we want to be defensive, we call it Pixie Gardens. But really it's just this huge slice of happiness. Just being able to make a world a bit like you might like everything to be. Kind of peaceful. Anyway, Stuart said to me, we'll have to show them something more than that. I mean, it's for people in England. So we thought, well, we'll have a kind of Greek god in the garden, a kind of Kiwi Greek god, and then we started looking. Well, it gets kind of embarrassing saying to strangers in the street, look, I'm looking for a man, and you see, he's got to be a Greek god, and, well, time was marching on, so Stuart rang up the sauna, and the sauna rang up Richard, who came third, and Mr. Gay Auckland, and said, there are these guys, they want you to, well, when Richard arrived, of course he was tense. I was tense. I hardly knew what to do. And I thought, my God, this suddenly seems so ethnographic, it's positively pornographic. I mean, it seems more like Power Tool than Channel 4. Anyway, one thing led to another. And to calm ourselves down, we just started talking, and he started telling me about this amazing costume he'd made for himself to wear to the Mardi Gras ball in Sydney, you see. Now, I don't want to suggest it's a reflection on Auckland that someone travels 2,000 miles to get to a good party. But, well, Richard began describing this fabulous costume, a skirt in the shape of the Rangitoto, a hat like Auckland's Harbour Bridge. Dame Edna would have loved it. I went on filming quietly for a while, and then I said very coolly, is your costume made? And he said, yes, it's hanging at home on the hanger. And I said, how far is home? And he said, not far. I thought about it for a moment. I was quite nervous. Then I said, let's go and get it. He looked a lot happier then, I guess because we'd reached a consenting agreement. So this is Richard, getting into the costume he'll wear at the Gay Mardi Gras Ball in Sydney on Friday, February the 17th, 1989. I guess it's a glimpse of life in New Zealand. Bah, bah, bah. These are the stars of the Southern Cross. And this is the hat in the shape of Auckland's Harbour Bridge. Well, it isn't at all what I'd intended this postcard to be, but I guess this is what happens to good intentions. They meet the bad.
Well, how fascinating.
Across Britain, there are now thousands of children in need of full-time or temporary care. There are also many well-qualified lesbians and gay men ready to foster them.
Will bigotry succeed in denying these children a home and denying our right to care?
The world we see is changing so fast. No guarantees how long does a feeling last.
There are 89,000 children in care in Britain today. Last month, Central TV launched a national campaign to find a family for those children who are in need of fostering and adoption.
And find me a family.
I don't think the television campaign encourages prospective lesbian and gay foster parents to come forward. They weren't looking for foster parents, for gay foster parents, they were looking for foster parents. And you know, I mean, that to me is not very good. And the image that they project anyway is definitely a heterosexual 2.1, half a cat, Purcell advert type family, which isn't the norm anyway.
I live in hope and whisper a prayer. When I come home that you will be waiting there.
From my work in local authority social work, I know that the most important thing a local authority has to do is to meet the needs of children within its care and to look at the best interests of those children. I know that to find the best people, you have to look at every area of society, every group within the community to get the best possible people.
Children can be fostered for just a few weeks or for most of their childhood. Others are fostered on a part-time basis. Our research shows that social services around the country have been using lesbian and gay foster parents for many years, though social workers have denied their sexuality.
Lesbian and gay parenting is seen to be contentious because I think it poses a threat to a section of the population that see themselves as the norm, and it raises issues about what is, you know, the ideal family type, and knowing that the reality is that there isn't an ideal family type.
In 1988, the London Strategic Policy Unit undertook a pioneering survey of lesbian and gay fostering.
Lesbians and gay men have been fostering for years now, however, haven't been doing so openly. Individual social workers knew that those applicants could provide very loving, caring homes and had all the skills to provide very good parenting to children who were up for fostering. So in that sense, there was a tacit acknowledgement of sexuality, but it wasn't made explicit.
As a foster parent, a single male foster parent, the emphasis had been on my singularity, I think it's important to say, rather than on my homosexuality. And I was invited to talk to the British Association of Adoption and Fostering, a forum of about 250 fostering adoption officers, and I was to talk of my experiences as a single male foster parent. And in the foyer, before I actually went on to talk to this rather grand group, the fostering adoption officer who worked for the authority who had placed my foster son came up to me and she said how delighted she was that I was there, and it was all very charming. But she went on to ask me not to disclose the name of the authority that had placed him, and I found that very, very shattering, in that it seemed to be them withdrawing support from what I was likely to be saying.
Your children are not your children. They are the sons and the daughters of life, longing for itself. They come through you, but they are not from you. And though they are with you, they belong not to you.
John Elderton and Don Smart have been together for 19 years. They've been attempting to adopt or foster for the last 12. Their determined efforts to foster as a gay couple have met with constant refusals from their local social services department. They finally began to foster through a private arrangement with Alison Smith, the mother of a 14-year-old boy, Danny.
I was actually looking for somebody to foster Danny part-time because Danny's handicapped, and I felt that I was going to forever look after Danny as a child. As it happened, he's growing up very quickly, but Don and John were both looking for a foster child, or to adopt a child, I think, originally, but found it difficult because of the social services policy not to use gay or lesbian to adopt.
May go to France with Don this year.
Yeah, I go foot this year. I came here to where Don and John live, and I met them both. I was immediately impressed, and I think Danny was too. I mean, it had to be his choice as well, of course, and that's how it all began.
Many lesbian and gay people face institutional prejudice in applying to be approved as foster parents. The first step is the process of assessment by a social worker. Many, like John and Don, do not get past this first stage if they openly declare their sexuality.
Some heterosexual and homosexual people don't make good foster parents, and therefore you can't talk about the adult's right to adopt. You can only talk about people's right to apply and people's right to be assessed to see if they would make good foster parents.
What's wrong with just coming to see us and to assess us? Or have the right to be assessed? We're not even being allowed that right because we're seen as not normal.
Now it is Rupert's turn to jump. That apple gives him quite a bump.
Somebody approached me one day asking me what I thought I was doing, having Danny fostered by two gay men. They seem to think that Danny's in danger of being messed about with in some way because there's two men looking after him.
The early stages there was question about who are you? Two men with a young boy, and we say yeah, two men doing the fostering.
Lots of myths and stereotypes exist about lesbians and gay men. One of the most pernicious, for example, is that gay men are responsible for sexual assaults on children. And of course we know that according to Metropolitan Police statistics that it's heterosexual men who carry out the vast majority. In fact, I think the figure is about 94% of sexual assaults on children are carried out by heterosexual men against girls and young women.
David Akanzania spent most of his early life in care, where he was sexually abused by a married heterosexual man.
I obviously get a bit upset when I hear all the outcries about lesbians and gays fostering shock horror. I mean, the fact of the matter is I think that there's probably more damage been done to kids by heterosexual couples in the past who were not sure of their sexuality.
Another prevailing myth that children brought up by lesbian and gay parents will be stigmatised at school and endure unnecessary suffering is challenged by Professor Davies, a psychiatrist and psychologist at Bristol University.
There are two systematic studies, one in America, one at the Maudsley in this country, where these children have been studied, and the children of lesbian households turn out to get on just as well with their peers, they're just as popular, they show no particular abnormalities by reason of any stigmatisation.
You can give them your love, but not your thoughts. They have their own thoughts. They have their own thoughts. You can house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in a place of tomorrow.
Judith Weeks and Pat Romans have been together for 28 years. They started to foster in 1971 and to date have fostered 52 children. Most of these children have been those defined by the social services as hard to place, and many of them have had severe emotional problems and physical disabilities. This unofficial policy of placing children with disabilities with lesbian and gay parents is a growing trend.
I was only considered suitable for what they considered to be second-class children, or what society considered to be second-class children.
I mean, they are quite wrong, actually, because they're both absolutely
First class.
They're first class,
Yes.
yes. But I do think that, that had they not been handicapped, we wouldn't have been able to have them. And when you think about it, that really is very strange, because if you have a child with special needs, it needs the very best sort of care you can possibly give it. And it is strange, and it is a weird thing that goes on, that, people who are considered second class are given second class children to look after. Well, I first started, I think it was about 1971, and at that time there was a little girl who was very severely handicapped. She was 2, and we were having difficulty in finding a foster home for her. And Pat and I talked it over and felt that, probably that was the thing that I could do. And so I stopped working in the office and did full-time fostering. And I fostered Louise and took various short-term children as well. Pat gave up her job at that stage, and we actually registered as a small children's home. And then we had a group of children. We actually had 6 children with some sort of special needs. I mean, the children that we took couldn't have accepted ordinary foster homes.
In certain local authorities, there's been a tendency to place children with disabilities with applicants who somehow aren't seen as normal or as good as other foster parents. And that policy really stinks, because it isn't prioritising the needs of those children.
Such a policy also shows that many of these local councils do not view lesbian and gay foster parents on an equal basis with other groups. Also disturbing is the fact that there are very few black lesbian and gay men who are applying to foster or adopt. The majority of lesbians and gay men who are going forward to foster and adopt are white.
That seems to be the case because of the difficulties that both lesbian and gay men have for coming forward as applicants to local authorities, but also the racism that black people know that they will receive from most local authorities in their application for fostering and adoption. It's only been the work of black workers within local authorities over recent years that has meant that black people within the community have felt confident enough to come forward and get some sort of sympathetic hearing.
Shall I show you how you do that? You do is you put it like that.
Marion and Sylvia provide respite care for Eddie, a 7-year-old who has learning difficulties. Respite care means that they share the responsibilities of childcare with Babs, his biological mother, on a regular but part-time basis.
Have you seen these mushrooms, Eddie? Have you ever seen anything this size?
Yes.
Look at this, they're huge.
So
Extraordinary.
extraordinary.
I wanted to provide respite care because I'm involved in working with adults who've got learning difficulties, and I'm very aware of the additional stresses and strains as well as pleasures that having a child with learning difficulties creates for a family. So I wanted to provide respite care as part of my commitment to community care. And also, more selfishly, I wanted to be involved with the child. I wanted to have a long-term but part-time relationship with a child, and respite care seemed an ideal way of doing that.
The weekend Eddie goes to Marion is just, I just can't explain the relief. I don't be glad to get rid of him, but it's the relief of knowing that I can go to bed when I want, get up, go out, know that he's well looked after, know that he's in capable hands. It's just marvellous.
I don't think there's any way I could have not said that I was a lesbian, because it would have been just extremely unfair on the family, just that sort of level of dishonesty. I don't think I could have done that. Nothing would have been unfair on Sylvia and myself. We'd have to sort of hide Sylvia in a cupboard whenever the child came to stay, which wasn't really on. And also I'm not very good at keeping a secret, so, I think it would have been out soon anyway.
My social worker rang me up and asked me, she said, did I know Marion had a woman friend? And I didn't know, but I said it didn't make any difference.
Okay, put it in. Brilliant. My relationship with Eddie's grown quite slowly in a way. When Marion first said that she wanted to go and provide respite care, I didn't at that time particularly want a child in my life, and also I wasn't living with Marion. So it was quite clear between us that I would be supporting Marion, but that any relationship with the child would actually be very much kind of happen if I liked the child and if it grew naturally, rather than something that I was kind of taking on from the beginning. But since then, I mean, partly because Eddie is so sort of charming and delightful, you can't help but actually want to get involved with him. And also, I've moved in here now, so that's actually kind of physically much more possible.
Marion is a founding member of the Lesbian and Gay Foster and Adoptive Parents Network, which was launched last month.
Yes, I wanted to set up a network of lesbian and gay foster and adoptive parents in order partly to get to support myself and to support other people at the various stages of fostering and adoption. And also to sort of raise the profile or raise the awareness of fostering and adoption by lesbians and gays, both so that it would be considered as an option by individuals, and that services, you know, that actual sort of statutory agencies, voluntary agencies, would see lesbians and gays as, you know, a potential source of foster and adoptive parents.
Right, really smush it about. Yeah, that's it.
Mash it all up.
Yeah.
Smash it, smash it. And then make your pipe.
Happiness is an intangible, immeasurable quality, but certainly that can be the only way of describing watching a boy growing up with a learning disability, which for all of us is a learning process almost, and to watch Danny compensate in other areas where he's brilliant for those areas in which he's not so adept. And actually just seeing a human being emerging is just a marvellous experience, and I hope it goes on. Right, who's going to be mother?
Tom.
John. Despite the fact that John and Don have successfully fostered Danny for 5 years, local social workers are still refusing to register them as prospective foster parents for other children.
Yes.
Children need placing, and there are couples out there, if only the authorities would get themselves together and get rid of the fears and the anxieties.
What we're now saying is, look, we know that this has been happening for a number of years now. We know that lesbians and gays have been successfully fostering. The next step must be that lesbians and gays can openly declare their sexuality, and that must not be seen as a bar to successfully processing their application.
Essex County Council is using Section 28 to prevent lesbian and gay groups from meeting in all its colleges of further education. The council's ban came in response to pressure from John Threlfall, principal of Colchester Institute, who was trying to stop the formation of a gay soc at his college. Threlfall had previously prevented the Students' Union from selling condoms. He refused permission for us to enter the college grounds.
I think the problem is that Essex Local Education Authority have taken the widest possible interpretation that they could have around this issue in order to basically cover their backs at the expense of, obviously, lesbian and gay students.
As this confidential letter shows, the county solicitor admits that Section 28 applies strictly to maintained schools, but he still advises applying it to FE establishments. When Section 28 came in a year ago, government talk was all about protection of children and waste of ratepayers' money, yet so far all attempts to implement it have been directed at college students. Last spring, Strathclyde Council and Leeds City College of Music also tried to ban gay socs, but they backed down when the National Union of Students produced legal opinion which says that Section 28 does not apply to FE colleges. Even Tory-controlled Hampshire County Council agrees with that. NUS's legal opinion claims that Section 43 of the 1986 Education Act requires principals to ensure freedom of association on college campuses. Yet Essex County Council remains unmoved despite the implications of its decision.
I think there's often the assumption that when you go to college, you're likely to come across a much more progressive attitude around different sexualities. I don't feel personally that that's actually true. In my position as an individual staff member, I've received several complaints just this term about incidents around violence against lesbians and harassment of other kinds. When we bear these facts in mind, I think it's even more important that lesbian and gay societies continue to exist.
Essex County Council told us they had no further comment at this stage. The chair of the Education Committee was unaware that the directive had even been issued. The chair of the Further Education Subcommittee also declined to be interviewed. In London, the Department of the Environment, which handles local government, thought it wasn't a case of particular relevance to them and referred us to the Department of Education and Science, who thought it was a matter for local government and referred us straight back. This week, NUS has written to Essex signalling their willingness to go to the High Court on the issue of freedom of speech. 1 year after the Act, this may well turn out to be the test case we've been expecting.
मुश्किल जीना यहाँ जरा हट के जरा बच के ये है बॉम्बे मेरी जान कहीं बिल्डिंग कहीं ट्राम में कहीं मोटर कहीं मिलता है यहाँ सब कुछ एक मिलता नहीं दिल कहीं बिल्डिंग कहीं ट्राम में कहीं मोटर कहीं मिलता है यहाँ सब कुछ एक मिलता नहीं दिल इंसान का नहीं कहीं नाम और निशान जरा हट के जरा बच के
I was born in India and I go back there roughly every 2 years. This winter I went back to Bombay and Delhi and collected these impressions of the gay scene.
In India it is been changing now.
One friend told me that gay life for men was changing. In big cities like Delhi, Bangalore, Madras, it's more organized. There are groups and people care for each other, but still there is no political organization for gays. Nevertheless, international gay attitudes have begun to reach India and contribute to a greater understanding of the problems of the caste system and family structure.
I just didn't want to get emotionally involved because I can't handle it. It's as simple.
Given the difficulties of having gay relationships, another friend told me he tried not to become emotionally involved because he found it very difficult to handle. Indian gay men always use the English word gay. Only this trip did I discover the Hindi equivalent. Samlaingik Sambandhan.
The cottages in Bombay are flourishing.
The what?
The loos are...
Yeah. They're not flourishing, they're smelling. They're smelling.
Every loo is an active loo in this city. It's
And there are these sort of proprietary rights over loos, my loo. That's the one I always go to. to that extent prepared.
But I don't understand how people make it in public rooms. I wouldn't even be able to get it up.
The gay perspective on the whole Indian sexual scene is very humanizing. It challenges the traditional insistence on marriage and family, which oppresses both women and men.
But there is no known case where the breakup of a long-standing lesbian or gay relationship has been considered exceptional enough. Faced with the Home Office, which takes no account of them, some lovers seek drastic solutions. Teacher Chris Gilliam met Joel Phipps in 1986 when Joel was stationed with the US Air Force in England. After Joel declared his homosexuality to the Air Force, he was discharged and given a 6-month visa. The pair then began searching for legal ways to live together.
We went around and saw quite a few solicitors and looked in different areas, marriage, businesses, investing money in the country to be able to stay. And basically drew a blank on everywhere. It seemed everywhere we went there was a door closing in our face.
We had heard a rumour, and that's all it was at the time, and there wasn't a lot of information available, that we might be able to solve the problem by going to Holland.
We just packed up everything that we had in 2 bags, put everything else in storage, the furniture and everything, sold the car and the house and just left. Took the day boat over to Holland. Hearing all of the liberal attitudes about Holland, we sort of expected to be walking out of the train station with 2 big open arms saying, "Welcome to Holland," you know. But it wasn't like that.
Instead, they were met with conflicting advice about how immigration rules operate in Holland.
They do recognise unmarried relationships for the purposes of immigration, and they don't discriminate between gays or straights. The right of unmarried people to bring in their foreign partners was applied about a year before we arrived to other EC citizens as well as the Dutch. And so we found that we could fit very neatly into that category.
Chris's EEC citizenship allowed him to live in Holland. Dutch law permits its gay citizens to bring in their partners and extends this right to Holland's EEC residents. Even so, Chris and Joel had to meet stringent requirements for joint accommodation, health insurance and income. After battling for a year, Chris was granted 5 years residency, and then Joel was given a dependence permit, renewable every year.
We felt we were fighting for a fundamental right to be able to live with the partner that you choose.
Holland offers a way in to some couples who cannot remain together in Britain. No other EEC country does this. On the other side of the world, Australian campaigners have achieved what they call an unofficial official policy, which allows residency to foreign partners of gay and lesbian citizens. In 1985, Rioske Shirazi was the first person to have his immigration status changed in order to stay with his partner Graham Bray.
We met in Tokyo, and this is about 8 years ago. And then I came here, and after a couple of years, I needed to change my status.
It did say in policy that a person with strong, compassionate and humanitarian grounds could be given residency. It didn't say anywhere that a gay relationship did not constitute strong, compassionate and humanitarian grounds. In our view, it was a compassionate and humanitarian grounds case, and we decided just to go in and argue on that basis.
Forced us to think about our relationship and the degree of commitment we had in our future and all of that. So it was sort of provided a framework to express commitment to each other.
We realised that there was no way they were going to be approved just on the merits of the case, despite the fact that that's the way it was supposed to work. and that if it was going to be won, that we would need to support that couple with a group which attempted to raise the issue and attempted to lobby around it.
The Minister for Immigration finally agreed to meet them.
He said that he recognised the fact that there were gay Australians and lesbian Australians, not that he ever used that word, who sometimes fell in love, not that he ever used that word, with people who were not Australian residents. He acknowledged that there would be some hardship involved for those Australians if they could no longer live together. He then went on to say that he would not and never would acknowledge us as family or give us equality with familial relationships, but that he would accept applications which were put to him for permanent residency by people in this situation, and that he would judge each of them on a case-by-case basis.
The arrangement is pretty fragile. It depends completely on the discretion of the minister in office. The minister could change and the arrangement could end. The government could change and the arrangement would end.
The Australian arrangement is still not written down in either legislation or departmental guidelines, though to date 200 lesbian and gay couples have been given leave to stay together. But unlike heterosexuals, lesbians and gays cannot bring in their foreign partners. They must already reside in the country. And once granted leave to remain, it is 4 years before they're entitled to permanent residency.
In effect, what this policy says to gay and lesbians is you have to prove yourselves 4 times more stable, 4 times more loving than the heterosexual world does, because in effect a straight couple can get residency usually within about 12 months. We've always accepted this offer because it was the best we could get. It is limited in its operation, and it certainly doesn't in any way represent the full equality that our organisation is still struggling for. I guess most importantly, your quality of life is determined by being able to surround yourself with the people that you really love. And immigration policies around the world are aimed at restricting people, at keeping them out. What we're trying to do is to break down those nation-state boundaries so that people can form personal relationships across boundaries and maintain them.
It could be a long time before my appeal is found admissible in Strasbourg. We have to keep on fighting. Of course, we have a responsibility to Lauren now. Lauren was conceived and born in this country and has a right with her mother to stay in the country.
Next week, in a special hour-long documentary, Out on Tuesday presents a moving account of the lives of lesbians and gay men in Nazi Germany. But tonight's programme closes with an alternative alphabet, a lavender lexicon, a deviance dictionary, alfalfa.
For further information about issues raised in the immigration item, contact the Lesbian and Gay Immigration Group, BM Welcome, London WC1N 3XX.